up, Fifth Downers? I'm Johnny Slokes, and you're listening to the Fifth Down Fantasy Football Podcast. I have my partner in crime, K-Mill.
Yo, what's up, Fifth Downers? Hey, what's going on?
We told you that episode 50 was going to be something special, and, I just want to say congrats to you, Fifth Downers. If you are still listening to our show, that means you either really like our voice in your head, or you're a really big nerd, or you made the fantasy football playoffs. Pat yourselves on the back.
Congratulations.
For today, we're going to do a little special edition. We dedicated this episode to fantasy football playoff strategy to help you guide yourself to victory. Because, we're not in the business for second or third place. We're in the business for championships. So let's do it.
All right, let's do it to it.
We'll get into some news and notes. Michael Thomas mispracticed today with a foot injury. The extent of the injury is unknown.
Yeah, that's kind of harsh news with his ascension this year, so we'll have to see, and I think if he's not able to play, that definitely ups Cooks's and Snead's value.
Yeah. We'll know more, I guess, tomorrow.
Yeah, that's how it works.
I also heard some news that, Theo Riddick mispracticed because of his ankle, but apparently it was his wrist.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That's surprising. I actually didn't hear about that.
It was just recently, probably, I want to say a few hours ago.
Wow. Well, good for you for staying on top of that. Yeah, that's definitely big news. Definitely monitor that. Yeah, hey, so Jordan Reed, he did individual drills today. He sat out some team-oriented parts of practice. But the beat writer on scene said that he did them fine and didn't exert any, or didn't show any pain. So it looks like he could be on his way to starting on.
He did practice in the individual drills. He was catching the ball with both hands, so that's nice. But he still didn't participate in any contact drills. I think that's smart.
Yeah.
But we'll just have to monitor the situation going forward. You're definitely rolling the dice.
Yeah, I think it's good news, though, that he's not in any obvious pain. I think that's the best part.
Yeah, we'll see how it goes, because, that's very positive news.
Yeah, and if he isn't able to start, you don't need me to tell you to fire up Vernon Davis if you have him in your on your team.
Yeah, I believe they got a pretty good matchup this week, so we'll get into that a little bit later on in the show. Macklin, he was removed from the injury report, and he will play tomorrow.
Nice.
So
that's good news.
I don't know how much you can expect out of him, though.
Yeah, I wouldn't expect to build Rome in a day with him, so I would definitely keep your expectations tempered, and I wouldn't really start him unless he's your best wide receiver 2 option.
He's been pretty disappointing all year.
Yeah, for real. I actually, I heard that Jordan Matthews and Ryan Matthews, both of the Matthews on the Eagles, both returned to practice today, so that's pretty good.
Peterson returned his promise that they would return.
Yeah, however, another thing to keep in mind, though, is I would keep an eye on both of the Matthews, and I wouldn't start them unless you had to.
Trevor Siemian was splitting time at practice at first team with obviously Paxton Lynch, but it looks like he's on track to return as a starter.
Yeah, that's understandable. I think all Denver fans are hoping that Siemian starts because Paxton Lynch, he's
awful.
Yeah, he's obviously has a long way to go. It doesn't seem like he's very comfortable with the offense. He seems like his pocket presence is probably his biggest weakness. And his downfield throws, he needs to work on both of those.
You can definitely see why they wanted to go with Siemian at the beginning of the year.
Yeah, exactly. And the reports we heard all preseason were he's raw. Don't expect him to start this year, and now we know why.
Sticking with Denver, I know you're talking about this a little bit before the show. Kubiak said that Forsett will split the workload.
Yeah, it sounds like both of the running backs Forsett will be immediately involved, and there's speculation that Forsett has a better handle on Denver's offense because, he played for Kubiak back in Baltimore in 2014.
It looks like things are getting murky over in Tampa Bay. According to the Tampa Bay Times, Greg Ullman believes that Martin will remain the primary back, The offensive coordinator is saying Quiz Rodgers will be in an expanded role, and now Charlie Simpson's come back. So, what's going on here?
I would feel really,
uneasy.
I would feel really uneasy starting anybody, and if I had to start one, I would pick Martin, obviously. But that's a situation where I don't think I would pick up Sims or Quiz Rodgers unless I had a drop candidate on my bench.
I mean, Martin really doesn't have a very good yards per carry this year.
Yeah, but he's also been battling injuries all year. So,
and you got to think, coming back off injury, he's faced like 4 tough run defense.
To be honest, this has the look of a backfield that I just don't trust, and I'll look for other options. I don't think I just want to stay away from the situation, I think.
AJ Green not expected this week. No shocker.
No shocker. Honestly, anybody holding out hope for AJ Green, just the light is dimming very quickly, and if you use him, it'll only be maybe for the championship, which how can you trust that when he's coming off of a major injury towards the end of the season? I don't know. I don't like it.
Adrian Peterson, he will not return if the Vikings get eliminated from playoff contention.
Yeah, and that was, and you know what? He's going to want injury assurances in his contract, and he has none right now, so he has no incentive to come play and rush back. So I don't see it.
Robert Woods got in a limited practice, so that's good. I don't know if he's going to return, but that's on the right track.
Yeah, that's good news, man. The receiver core for the Bills are pretty banged up right now, and they're going to need every healthy body they can get. So, and not only that, I think it helped benefit Sammy Watkins too, because you obviously need to cover another receiver, not just Sammy.
Yeah, I agree 100%. No practice for Julio. No shocker, no problem. Kaepernick will be the starter week 14, so that solves that puzzle.
Yeah, he actually has a pretty good matchup, too.
Yeah. I know we were talking about how he could be a decent stream, so that's good news.
Yeah, that is very good news because I picked him up as a stream in one of my leagues, so hopefully that pays dividends for me.
Sammy Watkins didn't practice. Once again, no shocker. Good news, though, is he said that he felt better after this past game than he did the week before. Yeah,
exactly. And I think it's honestly just a conditioning thing. I think he's getting back into football shape, and he's used to, running fast and for long distances. So, this is good news to hear.
Did you hear why LA is having a down year, according to Jeff Fisher? It's pretty funny.
Oh, they're having a down year, yeah. The one where I think they're 4-8 right now. Am I right?
Well, he was saying, he's like, well, we had a lot of high draft picks get hurt, and he goes, when Trey Mason goes AWOL, and Seven Bailey's not around, you can't really expect those kind of things, and it just happens, so we have to deal with it.
Yeah.
But, Trey Mason was like a late-round draft pick, said Bailey was like a late-round draft pick, so, who is he referring to?
Yeah.
Is he just really going to put the blame on those two players while they're having a bad year?
I think that's humorous that he's doing that, but it's also how amateurish he is. I mean, this guy just signed a contract extension for, 4 years? Or no, 2 years. It's a 2-year contract.
2 years.
Yeah, 2-year contract extension for 7-9? That's his best season. And he's never finished better than third in the division.
What's also funny is he still thinks that Danny Woodhead plays for the Patriots.
Wow.
It just shows you how out of touch he is with people.
Really? Where'd you get that piece? I had not heard that.
When the week they were playing the Patriots, he was talking about the running backs. He was like, yeah, they got a lot of versatile guys. They got Brandon and they got Danny.
Oh,
and that's all he went into it.
Jeez.
I think he was referring to maybe he was referring to Brandon Bolden and Danny Amendola, but I don't see it. He's talking about the running backs.
Yeah, jeez. Okay. All right, man.
Brandon Bolden only got 2 touches all year.
Yeah, legit, yeah.
Let's want to get into some strategies about adding and dropping players.
Yeah. That's the hardest part. I think that's always
Especially
my hardest part is because I can never know when to drop somebody. When is enough chances,
I mean, you got to look at it. Is this the appropriate time to drop this player? You got to look at the waivers. Always check transaction logs. There's people that are dropping players that maybe are still some value to them.
Yeah.
What I like to do is I like to look at the team I'm playing. Do they have the weaks or injuries at the position that I'm looking to drop, or maybe they have some weaknesses or injuries that I can exploit?
Yeah.
I mean, say you have a conundrum at running back. You're not sure. You're like, oh, man, should I drop this guy? Look at the other team. Do they need a running back? It's like, well, maybe I shouldn't drop this guy because if he picks him up and uses him against me.
Yeah, that's always a good strategy too. If you see the guy and he does have that sort of a thing where he has an obvious or he has a non-obvious start or not start candidate, you're gonna be like, yeah, you're gonna be scrambling and you want to watch who you drop and who might be able to pick him up. I know they go on waivers for like 2 days, but you really got to keep an eye on it.
Another thing is you gotta judge whether you can make this claim. Or you could just wait. Because a lot of times you might be able to wait, especially if it's like a kicker or a defense or even a tight end. You might be able to just wait and get them without wasting a waiver claim.
Yeah, that's
losing that waiver spot.
That's usually how you should always do it, unless you have a glaring weakness. Like I know in the start of the season, I had to use a waiver priority early because I wanted Tyrell Williams because Keenan Allen went out that first week. And sometimes, so if you have a glaring weakness, you should use that waiver priority. But if you don't, and you're just looking to maybe upgrade your team or like get a bench stash, you should always wait and see, and don't waste that waiver claim.
Another strategy you can go into is, like I said, look at the other team. Do they have any weaknesses or injuries that you can exploit? Because say they really need a tight end, you don't necessarily need a tight end. But what I like to do is always have like one spot on your roster. Maybe it's an empty spot, or maybe it's just a guy you'll never play, and you can just be your throwaway player basically. And you can say, oh, you really need a tight end, motherfucker? Well, I just picked one up, and I like to call that blocking. You just block them.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, if they have a glaring weakness, I think that's a great strategy to have. In fact, I've never really utilized that one, but that is a very helpful thing because I always have problems with, I want to drop this, running back handcuff, but, I want him in case something happens because he could really be good down the stretch. So that's always hard for me.
Well, I got one example of how I did it last year. I know I was playing this guy. It was at the end of the year, it was like week 15 or 14, something like that. Jonathan Stewart went out. And, this is like everyone had this conundrum. Is it going to be Artis Payne or is it going to be Fozzie, So I actually went all the way I cut two wide receivers I didn't need. Because, I had a pretty good quad. So I dropped them both and I picked up both Fozzie and a Payne train. So it blocked him. He didn't have a running back to play.
Oh.
He had some good running backs, but he didn't have anything on the bench.
Yeah, that was in the league we both played in last year, I think.
It was our league last year.
Yeah, that was it. Yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
Yes, it's definitely a good strategy, especially if they don't have a lot of depth on their bench.
Yeah. I always think a helpful strategy, and I say this all the time, man. I call it hoard the backs, and I love this strategy because if say you're good at receiver, you're good at all your positions, you don't really have a glaring weakness. What I like to do is at the end of the season, teams like Dallas, who they want to get their starters healthy for the playoffs. Maybe as soon as week 16. A guy like Alfred Morris hit for fucking peanut. Yeah, you could use him in your fantasy championship, and Alfred Morris, we've all seen what he can do, when Zeke's not in there, behind that Dallas offensive line, he could really get it done.
Some of these teams in week 16, they might have their season wrapped up, like they can't really move up in the standings anymore, or maybe they already have the conference locked up, and
yeah.
So some of these handcuffs could really be valuable.
Yeah.
Or on the vice versa. Maybe this team is already eliminated, and they're like, you know what? Let's just rest our studs. We don't want them to get hurt. That's always the thing, too.
Yeah, you have to keep your eye out on that. That's always something that becomes an issue at the end of the season. So it's always better if they have players from a team that's fighting for that playoff position. Because a perfect example, Atlanta. If Atlanta was in prime position, if they had already clinched a playoff spot right now, there would be no question that they would sit Julio Jones this week and let him get healthy for the playoffs. But they're fighting for their playoff lives right now. So, I know Julio has turf toe, and they're going to try to push him to play, because they need all their playmakers to try to win down the stretch.
And I am a big believer in playing players for teams that are fighting for those spots. They're going to come. I feel like they're going to come out hungry.
Yeah, in most cases they are, and sometimes not. It's not always accurate, but yeah, if you got teams in the playoff hunt, like say, I know that like teams have been mathematically eliminated, say like the Cardinals who have David Johnson. I mean, they're not going to sit him because there's still mathematically a chance they could go. They're not going to go to the playoffs though. It's too little, too late.
There's one other thing I want to bring up. It's kind of an experiment that I kind of want to try, but I feel like it's really risky. So don't try this in your league. But called like baiting your opponent. Like you got, say, a decent player. He's in a bad matchup. They have a weakness at that position, and you drop that player. Seeing maybe, hey, you're gonna pick him up and use him, and then he maybe gets you like 2 or 3 points. Maybe it gives you an edge.
Yeah, that's true.
I've never done that before. It sounds really risky, and you're most likely not going to have that player for the rest of the year.
Yeah, exactly. It's very risky because if he does pick him up, which is already a low probability as it is in a 10 or 10 plus league, and not just that too, you're pretty much, in the first round, you're burning him.
I'm talking about like a player like maybe like Sammy Watkins.
Oh yeah, wow, that actually does make sense. Yeah, that you could drop him. You're like if you as an owner are on the fence about using a certain player, like Sammy Watkins, for example, and you drop him, and the guy's like, "Ooh, I do have a weakness at receiver. I'm going to start Sammy." And it could also backfire on you. Sammy could have a fucking all world game. You never know.
I got a question for you.
Okay.
If you have, like, say, like a running back or a wide receiver, it's like a wide receiver, running back 3 or 4, would you feel comfortable dropping them for someone off the waivers to use just for 1 week? That's in a plus matchup.
I would say if it's not one of your studs, then yeah, I would consider doing it. Like if you have, I think the only time I would consider doing that is if I had real question marks in the flex. And there were a couple guys I had pegged on the waiver wire, like as guys that I would maybe start because of their plus matchup. Then I could see myself doing it, like getting rid of a guy, like I don't know, Tyrell Williams on my bench, with his current injury. Maybe dropping, dropping him, and maybe getting a guy like I don't know, somebody that would be on the waiver wire, like maybe I hate saying this, but like a guy like maybe. I don't know, Kenny Britt, of all people. I hate saying this because I can't trust the Rams. But, and using him for 1 week because he had a really good matchup, and he's been on a good track record,
Yeah, we'll talk about him actually a little bit on the show. Let's, we're getting into that right now, actually. Let's talk about rest of the season positions and, like, their strengths of schedule. Sound like a good idea?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's, I'm not really a guy that really likes to look into rest of the season schedules because, a lot of things could happen. There could be injuries and maybe the defenses just don't play as well, stuff like that. But the top 5 easiest passing schedules for the playoffs go as follows. Tampa Bay, nice. Denver, Houston, Minnesota, wah, 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 wah.
Yeah.
But Atlanta's number 5.
Okay.
But I'm just saying, a lot of the top passing schedules go to teams that can't pass the ball.
Yeah, right. That's true. That is so true.
But Matt Ryan and Julio Jones should eat.
Yeah, definitely. And same with Jameis and Mike Evans. They should eat too.
Yeah, I actually really like Evans. I think he has a good chance to finish as wide receiver 1 this year. Just because of his final schedule.
I think he does too, man. And I he was a guy that I was really right on preseason. I even said it too, like the first couple weeks. I said, dude, Mike Evans, man, he might like finish as the best receiver.
You did say that.
Yeah, and I actually think that he has now elevated himself into the OBJ, Antonio Brown, Julio level.
I was actually getting a little bit antsy, and I was looking ahead to like the 2017 ADP.
Uh-huh.
And yeah, he's the 4th wide receiver off the board.
Wow.
So he's right there.
Yeah.
to round out the top 10, it goes Buffalo, Miami, the Giants, and San Diego. They're all tied for number 6. And Detroit, Chicago, and the Jets are all tied for number 10. Do any of those teams jump out at you at all?
I think maybe the Bills. That kind of jumps out at me because that's an offense that could get going, in plus matchups.
And the Sammy Watkins, maybe he can have a breakout at the end of the year. And
who knows, maybe you pick up Robert Woods and he shows his stuff, or maybe Sammy Watkins goes down. I don't know. The only time I would feel comfortable with Robert Woods is like in the flex, but yeah, maybe Sammy. I think he's the best candidate to be a beneficiary of that. He's getting healthier, and the Bills are getting better matchups.
Yeah, a couple of mine jump out. So we already touched on a little bit. Tampa Bay, they play the Saints twice. They sandwich in between Dallas. They don't play in any cold weather games, and they play against two of the most efficient passing offenses. So Winston might have to air it out. Yeah. I really like the Winston and Mike Evans. Yeah,
I do too. Yeah, if you have Mike Evans on your team, this year you've had a really good year, I would assume, unless you've made horrible lineup decisions past him.
Stephon Diggs owners will be happy. And it really paid off to draft Stafford. He plays Chicago, the Giants, and Dallas.
Yeah, but the thing that's worrying me, the last time that Stafford played Chicago, man, he had his worst game of the season.
That is true. Chicago actually has a pretty good pass defense, so that's kind of surprising.
Yeah, but it is different too. The dynamic of that Detroit passing offense has kind of changed a little bit. Golden Tate's now the go-to guy, and Marvin Jones is kind of a complimentary piece.
Yeah, I kind of seen that coming a little bit. Maybe not to the degree that it happened, though.
Yeah, I didn't think it was going to. I thought it was going to be more of a Emmanuel Sanders, Demaryius Thomas situation, and he kind of had a really steep drop off.
All right, going right on to that trend, the wide receivers. Washington has a really good schedule. They get to play Carolina and Chicago because Chicago has a decent pass defense. They only give up 220 yards a game. The thing is, though, almost all the yards passing go to wide receivers. They're really good against tight ends, and they're really good against receiving running backs.
Yeah. It's actually funny. I wonder how they break down against slot receivers because I feel like that's kind of a weakness for Chicago.
Well, actually, I did show you that they're giving up only 11 points a week to slot receivers. So that's actually not bad, actually.
Yeah, it's really not bad. Yeah, that's kind of surprising to me. I feel like that would be an area that's exploitable. It's orange.
Yeah. So actually, some of the worst teams against the slot is actually San Francisco, Dallas, Atlanta, Washington, Arizona, and New England. And also Cincinnati's up there too.
Oh.
Yeah, but I think Garcon and Crowder might be able to get it going. Say if you get to the finals,
Yeah, no, I think those two guys are actually really good guys to have for the playoffs. Maybe not every matchup, but they both are at least warrant flex consideration. I think.
I think one of my favorites. Well, it was one of my favorites. San Diego. They play Carolina, Oakland, and Cleveland. The problem is, which receiver are you going to trust? Because Tyrell's banged up, T-Ben's hurt, and Inman's just another dude.
Yeah. I think at this point, from a health standpoint, I know Tyrell Williams, he was kind of invisible until later in the game, he caught that touchdown. But, you really got to keep an eye on that. I think that, as much as it pains me to say, because I want to agree with you, Inman's just another guy, but, he keeps getting it done the last couple of weeks, and, he's one of the only healthy bodies they have. So, I don't know if that relates to trust, but you might want to roll with him in your flex or at least consider it.
Another good matchup for wide receivers is Los Angeles. Just the problem is they really don't got wide receivers. They got Kenny Britt, and that's it.
Yeah.
But they play Atlanta week 14, and then they have to play Seattle week 15, and then they play the 49ers week 16.
Yeah, I don't have a matchup this week. I have a first round bye, but I'm actually kind of struggling with the decision, because say you have like an obvious start candidate like Antonio Brown, like you're not sitting Antonio Brown, but then you have your second or your third wide receiver position, and you're sitting there and you're mulling over like two names, and I think the biggest one for me is like Jordan Matthews or Kenny Britt, and they're both guys that I can't trust right now because of the current states of their teams. Right now I'm tending on hey, might as well roll with Britt.
I mean, he did score a garbage time touchdown, which is Goff scares the shit out of me.
Yeah, it does scare the shit out of me too, but Wentz is kind of starting to scare the shit out of me too. The Eagles, were the garbage time team last year, and Jordan Matthews is Mr. Garbage Time himself. So I think if you got to start one of those guys, you're hoping for something in garbage time.
Well, actually on the year, Britt has actually outscored Jordan Matthews.
Yeah, I know. That's very, very surprising considering, Kenny Britt, hasn't been around he's been around forever, it seems, and he's always been there, but he's never been good, and this year I think he's like the only option, because let's not kid ourselves, Tavon Austin is not rosterable at this point.
Another team that has a pretty good schedule going forward is Atlanta. They play the Rams this week, and then they play San Francisco, and then they end the year with Carolina. So, it's looking good for Julio, but it might also be looking good for a guy like Gabriel.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah,
San Francisco and Carolina are not good against the slot.
Yeah, definitely a guy that warrants flex consideration. I'm more interested though in quarterbacks specifically. Like who do you deem I know we obviously know our must starts and this and that, but. Say a team's got a guy like, Tom Brady, and then they have a guy like Eli Manning. Tom Brady doesn't have the best matchup this week. Would you consider sitting Tom Brady for a quarterback with a better matchup?
It'd be really tough.
Yeah.
I'd have to probably still go with Brady over Eli.
Yeah, I was reading something the other day, and it made a lot of sense, and I'd never realized it until just now. But Tom Brady actually, Tom Brady, I believe he hasn't cracked top 10 in the fantasy playoffs since 2013, I believe. And you'd have to fact check me on that one. But I did read something about that. But it's been at least the last 2 years that he hasn't been a top 10 quarterback for the fantasy playoffs.
Now that you bring that up, he has been kind of historically not so good in the playoffs. So that's kind of good that you brought that up.
Yeah, so I was just thinking about that too because I own Tom Brady in a league and I'm on the fringe of maybe do I sit him for a guy that has a better matchup? But then again, there's not a lot of guys you can trust like Brady, because at the very least I think Brady has a very high floor and a very high ceiling at that. So at least that if Tom Brady's on an off game, you still have a pretty safe floor.
Yeah, he's one of the all-time greats and all that. He's actually been having a really fucking good year. So it'd be really hard for me to sit him.
Yeah, absolutely. But last week against, LA, he kind of struggled a little bit. So, that's just something to keep in mind. I am not by any means advocating don't start Tom Brady, but but let's say that scenario happens.
Sit him week 15 though.
Yeah, Tom Brady's just one example. Who else on that we have that's like a start candidate, a guy that you have pegged like Russell Wilson? Would you consider a guy like Andy Dalton going up against the Browns to start Andy Dalton instead of Russell Wilson?
You know what? That Seattle offense is so hard to predict. I could definitely see that happen.
You're saying that you could see yourself rolling with Dalton against the Browns?
Yeah, I have no issue with that.
Okay, I just want to get your take on that because that's a question I get a lot is, who do, my quarterback, my guy that I drafted, as my QB1 has a tough matchup, and I really want to win this game. It's a must win. It's a playoff game, should I stream a guy?
That's not actually a bad idea. There's some good guys that you can't stream, though, because I know in our league there isn't.
Yeah, there's not a lot of streaming candidates, in a lot of leagues, depending on your waiver system.
Yeah, it really just depends on are people still rostering two quarterbacks. That's really what it comes down to.
Yeah, I don't know. I think sometimes people get confused and they think that, this is a real thing. What's going to happen if your quarterback goes down? You got to have a backup on your bench, but, this is fantasy. You don't need two quarterbacks.
I will say, though, that, the Seattle Seahawks don't have exactly a good fantasy schedule going forward. I mean, they got Green Bay this week, so that's cool. But they also get LA and then Arizona. LA plays pretty tough. And then they got Arizona, who's one of the best pass defenses. So
yeah, it's rough. Sometimes you can't. And Russell Wilson has depending on how usually his offensive line doesn't give him enough time to throw the ball. Anyway, so he's got to scramble and run for his fucking life. But so you got to keep an eye out on that. So there's some games where he's struggled, especially in the Tampa Bay game where he played a good defense. He struggled. And he was struggling with those downfield throws.
So, just real fast, I want to go over the top 5 worst cornerback duos, I guess you could say. These teams give up the most yards passing to wide receivers. It was as follows. Kansas City's number 1. They give up 2,443 yards, 15 touchdowns, 183 receptions. Then goes San Francisco, Green Bay, Tennessee, and Carolina. These teams have all given up over 2,000 yards receiving to wide receivers. So
yeah.
Those are definitely teams you want to look for in matchups.
Yeah, and exploit, those matchups too. Like, I know that I am like looking at Amari Cooper this week. I'm actually playing him in a fantasy matchup, and I'm kind of worried because I know that that's a great matchup for him. Every time this year, I've always said it, Kansas City has such an overrated pass defense, and it's inflated because, Marcus Peters will get the picks. But as far as cover corners, these guys will give up touchdowns, and they'll give up a lot of yards.
And some other defenses that are noteworthy as well that don't play very well against receivers is Atlanta, as you've seen the other night, the Jets, the Saints, but the Saints don't give up a lot of touchdowns. They only go to 11 touchdowns receivers this year.
Hey, Revis Island, man. Revis Island.
Another one is also Tampa Bay. They've given up 16 touchdowns, so that's not good.
That's no good.
But, some of the ones that you want to avoid is obviously Denver. They've given up only 116 receptions, 1,300 yards, 7 touchdowns. Minnesota's up there.
No fly zone.
One that might surprise you is Pittsburgh. They've given up 165 receptions and 1,896 yards, but only 7 touchdowns.
That's impressive. I would not have guessed that if I didn't see it with my own eyes. I know I saw that graph earlier, but I would not have believed that.
Yeah, I mean, obviously Houston's good. Another one that's kind of surprising is Cincinnati. They've given up 1,722 yards, only 11 touchdowns.
That's actually not too. That's actually not too surprising for me. You got Drake Kirkpatrick back there, Pac-Man Jones. That doesn't really surprise me too much. But there have been times where Cincinnati this year have ceded quite a few yards and some touchdowns. I know it kind of happens. Like they'll have a good game, and then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, some team will torch them. Like for instance, Trevor Siemian and Emmanuel Sanders. They ate. I think it was week 4 or something, where Trevor Siemian threw like 4 touchdowns against them.
Yeah, that's kind of surprising.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It will completely blindside you when they have those games, but it doesn't really surprise me. I do peg them as one of the better secondaries in the league.
And some other noteworthy ones is Seattle. They've given up almost 2,000 yards, actually, but only 9 touchdowns. Jacksonville's up there.
It's about to get worse with that Earl Thomas injury, too.
It might, yeah. Arizona's up there as well. They've given over 2,000 yards, 2,028, but only 10 touchdowns. And I got some ones that seem like they'd be good matchups, but they're deceiving to me. One of them's Detroit. 1,874 yards, so they're giving up some yards, but only 11 touchdowns. Another one's Washington. 1,953 yards, only 10 touchdowns. And last but not least, San Diego, they give up a whopping 2,115 yards, but only 10 touchdowns.
Wow.
So those are some deceiving ones.
That is very deceiving.
All right, you want to jump into some running backs?
Yeah, man.
All right, before we go through some running backs, let's name off the top 5 running back defenses in terms of fantasy points allowed. These are defenses you do not really want to play your running backs against. Sometimes you might have to. Number one's Baltimore. They've given up only 789 yards rushing, 3.4 yards a carry. But they have given up 73 receptions to running backs. So if you have a PPR running back, do not be afraid to play him.
Yeah, no, definitely.
Number two is Arizona. They've given up only 839 yards. And, they're giving up 10 touchdowns, though. But, that's pretty good, though. 3.3 yards a carry. So that's kind of rough.
Yeah.
Seattle, they've got 1,001 yards, only 6 touchdowns, so they're pretty tough, 3.6 yards a carry. One that seems like it's good because of yardage, Dallas, 855 yards, but teams have only ran the ball against them 197 times all year, and that's because Dallas is always winning.
That's true,
They're
yeah.
still giving up 4.3 yards a carry.
Yeah, Dallas is a team that has all season been playing from ahead. They've had a very easy schedule up to this point this year, and I think you kind of hit it on the head. Minnesota kind of exposed them a little bit in last week.
Yeah. Another one that's tough to run against is New England. 864 yards, only 4 touchdowns, but 72 receptions given up for 600 yards. So you can play your PPR backs against them.
Yeah, that's a PPR exploitable one.
The next defenses that I will name off are just their defenses. They didn't make the top 5, but they've given up under 1,000 yards for the season. Is Carolina, Tennessee, Green Bay, which that trend's starting to come around because they're only a yard away. San Diego and Atlanta.
Wow.
So those are some tougher matchups, but you might still be able to get away with playing your running back.
That's true.
Now let's get into some of the defenses that, let's fire up the running backs. San Francisco obviously is the worst.
Yeah.
Almost 1,800 yards, 17 touchdowns. You're firing up all your guys against them. They're giving up 5 yards a carry.
Dead last.
Cleveland, almost 1,500 yards, 13 touchdowns, 4.6 yards a carry. So that's good.
It's good if you got Jeremy Hill this week.
Yeah, I like it. This is a defense that has under 1,000 yards rushing for the season is Atlanta. The reason why they're the third most points against is because they've got 94 receptions against.
Wow.
That's insane.
Yeah, that's an exploitable thing for your PPR guys.
And they're giving up 10 touchdowns.
Man.
Washington's up there, almost 1,200 yards, 14 touchdowns, 65 receptions. So, you're doing it all around there. Oakland, 1,338 yards, 11 touchdowns, 4.8 yards a carry. So,
wow.
Some other defenses that are kind of exploitable towards the run is Pittsburgh, New Orleans, San Diego's up there because of all the receptions they give them. They're another defense that gives up a lot of receptions to running backs.
Yeah, so those pass-catching running backs could really eat against that kind of a defense.
Jacksonville's up there because they've given up over 1,000 yards. I'm sorry, they've given up under 1,000 yards, but they've given up double-digit touchdowns. And Arizona, they've given up 10 touchdowns. So
I guess all that money in free agency didn't help them.
All right, so let's go over some running backs that have some good matchup. One of my favorites is Sean McCoy. Pittsburgh is up there in terms of fantasy points against. They played them this week. They also give up a lot of receptions. They got Cleveland and Miami to finish out the year. So I really like that one. Is there a running back that you like in particular?
Well, I wouldn't say it's because of his recent play, but I think Lamar Miller has a pretty good schedule right down the stretch. He plays Indianapolis this week, and this is a perfect opportunity for him to really get his legs back out from under him and exploit a matchup.
Yeah, maybe he got to get healthy first.
Yeah, man, that's what I'm hoping.
He also gets Jacksonville and Cincinnati after that, so that's pretty good.
Yeah, definitely. I think I also like David Johnson's schedule down the stretch. He plays Miami, And then he plays New Orleans. And then, he does have a tough matchup for the championship, Seattle. But I think overall, though, 2 out of 3, I'll take that.
I don't care who he's playing.
Yeah, you're starting him no matter.
Johnson, you're playing him.
You're playing him no matter what.
Some other ones I do like is Melvin Gordon. He does play Carolina this week, but he gets Oakland and Cleveland to finish out. So that's good.
Yeah, that is good.
The aforementioned Jeremy Hill that you said, he does a really good matchup. Cleveland, then he goes to Pittsburgh, and he gets Houston. Houston's a funnel defense. They're really good against the pass, not so much against the run.
Yeah, and I think that has a lot to do with, the absence of J.J. Watt.
And then I know he's kind of banged up, and it's a murky, but he does have a good schedule. Martin. He gets New Orleans twice and Dallas. Like I said, Dallas gives up 4.3 yards a carry. If they can keep that game close, maybe he gets some workload. That might not be bad.
Yeah, that's murky, baby.
And my last but not least, Jonathan Stewart. He plays San Diego, another funnel defense. And then he also plays Washington, Atlanta.
Don't hate me for saying this. Don't, okay? I will say Todd Gurley does have a good matchup down the stretch, too. He plays Atlanta this week. He plays Seattle the next week. And then he plays San Francisco to finish out the year. I'm not saying that that's the greatest because we know how he's played this year, but, those are 2+ matchups. Seattle will be tough, but, I'm just saying Todd Gurley should be in that conversation, too.
The only issue I had with him playing Atlanta is, what if Atlanta gets out to a big lead and then they just phase him out?
That's true. That is a good point.
I guess that could kind of go for Lamar Miller, too.
Yeah.
So,
You're right.
But, I don't think he's gotten over 100 yards this year in any game.
Yeah, I think you're right. I would have to say so.
All right, some running backs that I would not really want to play is Jay Ajayi. He plays Arizona, the Jets, and he does have a decent matchup against Buffalo, but those first 2 is rough.
Yeah.
Another one I'm not really liking is LeGarrette Blount. It doesn't get much rougher than this. He gets to play Baltimore, Denver, and the Jets.
Man, that is pretty rough.
There are 2 of those are in the top 5. So maybe not Denver. But it's not looking good.
Yeah, those are 2 top-tier run defenses. Denver's taken a step back since last year, so yeah, I don't like that at all. And you got to think about the fact, Dion Lewis and James White and all the other factors involved. There are very big red flags being hung up around LeGarrette Blount.
Yeah, this is the time of the year where he normally shines, but maybe it could be a little bit different. They've been going a lot of 3 receiver sets, so we'll see.
We shall see.
Another one I don't like is Spencer Ware. I know he gets Oakland, but after that he gets Tennessee, who's pretty tough. They have under 1,000 yards, and they get Denver. So, it could be like a run and slug game, but it's not exactly a great schedule.
No, it's not. But Denver. Let's not kid ourselves. Denver has definitely taken a step back. So I consider Denver a plus matchup for running backs. So you look past Tennessee. He actually does have a pretty good schedule, and I know he turned it on last week, but he's not getting the yardage totals you want to see. He's getting the touchdowns, which is nice, but he's really got to get his legs back out from under him, I think.
Before last week, he wasn't even getting the touchdowns. It was like 6 games before he got the double touchdown game.
Yeah, exactly, and that's what I'm alluding to. Is you gotta sit there and look at that.
All right, let's go over to tight end. Top 5 defenses against tight ends. Obviously, Arizona, Philadelphia, and Baltimore's really good. Kansas City and Houston. Those are the defenses you really want to think about not playing your tight end against those guys. Some other ones also include Chicago. They only given up 5 touchdowns all year. Jacksonville, they only given up 3 touchdowns all year. LA, they only given up 4 touchdowns all year. And all the defenses I just mentioned have also given up less than 500 yards.
Wow.
So, and Arizona hasn't given up a touchdown yet.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, that's impressive. One team in the league that hasn't given up a touchdown to the tight end position.
Some tight ends that some tight end defenses that you can exploit, though. Carolina's at the top of the list now. They've taken over Cleveland. They've given up 61 receptions for 756 yards, 9 touchdowns. Cleveland's also given up 9 touchdowns, 791 yards. So, they're up there, too. Cincinnati, Atlanta, they've both given up 7 touchdowns. Detroit is still up there. They've given up 8 touchdowns, but their yardage isn't as high as theirs, 671 yards. So, those are some defenses you can exploit.
Yeah, definitely.
With that being said, I think one of my favorite tight ends going forward, if he can get his volume back, is Antonio Gates. He plays Carolina, Oakland, and Cleveland. And, Oakland, they've gotten a little bit better over the past couple of weeks, but Carolina and Cleveland, they're at the top of the list.
That's impressive. I mean, that's surprising, too.
Another one that this guy's been quiet, but I can see him getting right real soon. Greg Olsen. He plays San Diego. I know that they're in the middle of the road, but after that he plays Washington and Atlanta.
Yeah,
So
I could definitely see him getting right as well. Those are some good plus matchups, and I think he's just too talented. And down the stretch, Carolina's.
Some guys that I don't necessarily like, I would actually consider benching Delaney Walker for the year. He plays Denver, Kansas City, and Jacksonville. They're all tough against tight ends. So that's not good. I'd probably consider benching him for the year.
And you might, but some teams might not have a better option than Delaney Walker. I mean, think about this. Would you rather, would you rather start Dwayne Allen or would you rather start Delaney Walker?
Well, I feel you, but there's some options. I mean, this week he plays Denver, right?
Yeah.
So you could play Fedorowicz. He plays Indianapolis, or you could also play. You could play Jason Witten.
Yeah,
play the Giants.
Play Brait.
Yeah, if he's available.
If he's available.
Another tight end I don't like is Martellus Bennett. He's not getting it done without Gronk, and his schedule gets hard. Like I said, Baltimore, Denver, and he does get the Jets. They're not that good against tight ends, but Baltimore and Denver are pretty tough against tight ends. And one more tight end it's not terrible, but it's not very good. Jimmy Graham. He plays Green Bay, so that's good. He plays the Rams. They've only given up 4 touchdowns, under 500 yards, and then he plays Arizona. So that's rough. That
is pretty rough. But, he's been, I think, arguably the best tight end in fantasy. So, at this point, it would take a lot for you to sit him on your bench.
With that being said, let's talk about a little bit of lineup construction, and we'll get the show on the road.
All right.
So when you set your lineup, how do you prefer to do it? Do you have a difference if you are the favorite as opposed to being the underdog?
Well, there's one strategy in particular that, sometimes I'll pull out for the playoffs. I did it one time. I remember I had Tom Brady and I had, who was it? And then Eli Manning. And the guy I was playing had OBJ, and I knew that I could use that to my advantage, because I could play Eli, so whatever touchdowns OBJ got, they would cancel out, and I would get the same touchdowns. I would get the same amount of points. So
that's a really good strategy.
Yeah, so if you have that, which would be a really rare, but if you have a quarterback and the other guy has the receiver, tied to that quarterback, it's a great thing, because whatever points he gets from that receiver is going to cancel out. So. That's one way. But yeah, speaking from if I'm the favorite or the underdog, if I'm the favorite, I tend to be a little conservative with my lineup. I'm going to start the guys mainly. If I do my own projections, I'm going to get the guys that I think are projected to score the most points. Obviously, I'm not really going to take too many chances. But when I'm the underdog, I might be looking, hey, I got, a mediocre guy in here. Maybe I should take a chance on a guy that could just boom, blow up. So maybe I might
maybe get rid of a guy that's a guaranteed like 80 yards, but maybe not a touchdown. And then instead of playing him, maybe play a guy that could get either 20 yards or get you 150 yards and like 2 touchdowns.
I know we've mentioned him a bunch of times on the show this time, but Sammy Watkins is a perfect boom or bust guy, So say you have like 2 obvious starts for receivers, but you're an underdog, and you know what? You know that to beat this guy, you have to maybe take a leap of faith here, and you know that a guy like Sammy can blow up anytime he touches the field. So maybe take one of those guys out, like maybe a Demaryius Thomas, and start Sammy Watkins, and you're like, well, I'm going to, take my chances here.
That's kind of like how I like doing it. Especially say you're the underdog. A lot of people think that, if you just play the best players, you should get the most points, but that's not always the case.
No,
sometimes
it
might not be enough, or sometimes they don't perform, so you need to think about other routes. Maybe think about people with more potential, like you were saying. So that's a really good point. Maybe even play a couple of guys that have high upside if you're a big underdog.
Yeah, like for instance, if it's like, would you want to play a guy who has horrible matchups like Delaney Walker, or do you want to play a guy that could, potentially blow up like Dwayne Allen did, last Monday night when he scored 3 touchdowns? It's just sort of that sort of thing.
Yeah. Or sometimes from the favorite, like you were saying, just play sort of player safe guys, but have that high upside guy in your pocket, because if you could always match his high upside guy, then it cancels out. Yeah.
I think that's the thing too. It's a very play studs always, as we like to refer to it here on the show. That's a common
someone.
Yeah, that's a common strategy we hear a lot, and it's like, for the playoffs you got to play your studs. But, maybe you got a guy like, Lamar Miller, who's just not getting it done. He hasn't been for a couple weeks. And, if you're genuinely in a really close projection of a matchup, you might want to consider maybe benching him. I mean, I'm not saying this time around because Lamar Miller has an excellent matchup this week, but it's just an example. You got a guy that's struggling. You might want to think about, he's your stud, but how much can you really trust him in a playoff game where it's do or die?
Sorry, my ear was itching really bad.
No, that's okay.
I got a perfect example. Last year, if you played Big Ben Week 15 against Denver, it really paid off dividends. I mean, he had 4 touchdowns, 350 yards, or some shit like that.
And Antonio had 2 touchdowns.
But if you wanted to keep playing your stud, because he was a stud last year, if you kept playing that stud, the very next week in your fantasy playoffs, he laid a dud down against the Cleveland Browns. He played a shitty Brown performance.
Wait, you mean the Bengals, right?
Was it the Bengals?
Yeah, it was the Bengals.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, I think he scored me 5 points or some shit like that. Luckily, the other guy had Aaron Rodgers and he had a shitty week, but that's neither here nor there. But I'm just saying.
Or maybe it was the Browns.
Your stud sometimes in a tough matchup is not a bad idea, but don't always stick with them.
Yeah, you might be right. Actually, it might have been the Browns. I'm sorry, I might have misspoke. I thought you were talking about the playoff game.
I know it was a division game.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah, no. That's always a big thing, So you got to really look at a matchup, and you got to think of what's going to happen, And there's sometimes where you're just going to get burnt flat out, There's a guy where he's going to have the best matchup in the world. Like for instance, a guy like I don't know. They're playing the New Orleans defense, for example, and you're like, oh, this is a must start, or it's like Tom Brady against New Orleans, and you're just like, I have to start Tom Brady, and then somehow, some way, he's going to struggle. It just happens, and it sucks.
We just got this question on Twitter. He probably doesn't know we're going to answer it right now. I literally just got it. Maybe I'll ask you.
All right.
Week 15 defense. So he's looking ahead.
Okay.
The Texans versus Jacksonville, Buffalo versus Cleveland, Ravens versus Philly, Dolphins versus Jets, or Packers versus Chicago. Man, that's a lot of options. But how do you feel about those defenses?
A lot of really good options. I like Baltimore against Cleveland. I mean, talk about
There's Buffalo.
Buffalo against Cleveland.
Yeah.
Wait, who'd you say the Ravens played?
Philly.
Oh, never mind then. Who was the first one? Because that one was nice. I like the
It's the Texans versus Jackson. I was going to say it over again.
Yeah.
Texans versus Jacksonville, Buffalo versus Cleveland, Baltimore versus Philly, Miami versus the Jets, or Packers versus Chicago.
I think the first one sticks out the most to me. The Jaguars, man. Blake Bortles has been pick city lately. His receivers aren't getting it done around him. Allen Robinson has just gone away and hidden away. I don't know where he is. I don't know where we can find him. And there's no run game to speak of. So I think that Texans are kind of middle of the road as far as the run goes. But as you've said and referenced, the pass defense has been pretty damn good this year. So I think they would be my candidates just because they could probably get about probably 2 picks off of BB.
Yeah, I would have to lean towards Houston as well. Jacksonville turns the ball over like crazy, so that's probably the one I would lean towards as well. Anyways, back to what we were saying about lineups. What would you do if your stud had a tough matchup? Would you still consider playing him, or would you look for other options?
I think the only way that I would sit my stud is if I had a better option on my bench, or say if I was the favorite in my matchup and I knew I had a little bit of wiggle room. Say if I got a goose egg, I had some wiggle room. Like for instance, if I had a guy like that if I had a better option, like I'm trying to think of a good example here. Like say I had Tyrell Williams, pegged to start, as my wide receiver 3 for the week. And I had a guy like Sammy Watkins on my bench, and I want to put Sammy in there, plug him in real quick. So I would only do it with an equal value type of guy. I wouldn't say bench a guy like Julio Jones, who's got, an obvious wide receiver 1 week in, week out with a tough matchup, and play like a wide receiver 2 with a good matchup. I would still start Julio no matter what.
Of course.
Yeah.
All right. Here's how I take it. Sometimes I will consider still playing him. Usually, though, if I have a tough matchup, I prefer it to be a quarterback over a running back or receiver because, say a quarterback gets like 230 yards, 2 touchdowns, hopefully no interceptions or anything like that because I suppose that, but in a tough game, that's okay. That's not going to lose you a week. But if a running back gets you like 10 carries for 29 yards, or a receiver puts you up like Allen Robinson numbers, like a 3 for 31, that's going to fuck you over. That could lose you a league.
Yeah.
So what I'm basically saying is if you are going to play a receiver or a running back in a tough matchup, what I like to do is like keep it a little bit more balanced in the rest of my lineup. Maybe my flex spot is where I play someone that can really blow up like a high upside guy, so it kind of like balances out a little bit.
You always got to. It's always nice to have that one guy that he could potentially get you a goose egg in the flex, or he could blow the fuck up and win you your week.
Yeah, because you always want to have a good balance between safe versus security. You know what I mean? It's all about balance.
Yeah, exactly. And another strategy too. Don't play too many players from the same team. If say you did that, or maybe it's your favorite team, or whatever, I don't know. Don't play too many players from the same team because say if you sometimes it can backfire. The stat could work nice. You got Drew Brees and you got Michael Thomas. That could work great. It could also backfire, though, as referenced last week. If you started both of those guys, you did horribly. Same with, if in some weeks where, you started Derek Carr and Amari Cooper, if you had both of them on your team, it might really blow up in your face and it could lose your week as far as fantasy playoffs go.
It either makes your team really explosive or it makes you put up a dud.
Yeah, and that's why the stacking is such it's a double-edged sword. Like you're literally gambling.
I will say though that if you do have like a stack and a high-powered offense, like we said, sometimes it can work, sometimes it would not work. But if it's a high-powered offense with a good matchup, you could have potential to blow up in the playoffs, and that could win you your lead.
Like I said, double-edged sword, man. I think my favorite stat going into this week is going to be the Buccaneers, man. You start Winston and Evans.
That could be pretty good.
That could be nice.
Another thing I want to know, or another thing I want to tell you guys, is to know your league and its scoring system, especially when you're setting your lineups up. Is it a full PPR, making it beneficial to play wide receivers? Is it a touchdown-dependent league? Or is it like a point-per-carry like our league, where running backs are pretty valuable, especially the ones that can run and catch? So you really got to be mindful between the balance of upside and security between the different leagues.
Yeah, that's absolutely a great point. You have to know your scoring system, because that could really be beneficial for a guy who's wide receiver heavy and not so beneficial for a guy that's running back heavy, or vice versa. So yes, definitely know your scoring system.
Do you have any good resources you want to give your fifth downers that could help them with their matchups?
I always like to make my own rankings, and if there's very few sites that I actually do trust their rankings. I don't trust Yahoo. I don't particularly trust ESPN. I like Fantasy Pros. I think they're fantastic. They do great work. They have a lot of resources, and even their paid resources, because I have paid for them in the past. They have great resources, great analysis on your lineups. They'll even help you, make waiver decisions and this and that, and they're fantastic. That's the resource that I usually go to, them and Pro Football Focus.
Yeah, the good thing about Fantasy Pros is they have an assortment of experts from different sites, and they pretty much collaborate them all together to get their rankings. So that's a good site for you people to use. I prefer to make my own, because I'm going to be going setting my lineups anyways. I'm going to want to set the guys I want to play it, so I might as well just make my own rankings.
Exactly.
I will say, though, a good resource that it's not really fantasy football centric, but Football Outsiders. They give you some great stats that they made. DVOA is defensive variance over average. It's basically every player's rating based in a situation against other players. The positive numbers is numbers over what an average player in that situation would get. Negative is obviously you're playing like shit. So that's really good. They also have the breakdown of how his team does against wide receiver 1s, wide receiver 2s, the slot, 10, etc. So it's a really good resource for you. This is not really so much for lineups, but really good, fast injury updates, sleeper bot. They're really good.
Yeah, and I think another thing too is trust yourself too, and also spurn the conversation. Talk to your friends, see what they think. You have guys around you that are knowledgeable about fantasy football. Take all of what they're saying. If you're asking them about a particular matchup, and they all have different opinions. Take all those into account. But at the end of the day, it's your decision, and you're either gonna live or die by that choice. So look at it from the fact of you're in control. And make the best decision possible, but you'll have choices and consequences, basically.
Some other things that I like to do when I'm setting my lineup is sometimes what I'll do is I'll have the same kicker as my quarterback, which I'm not doing that this year because Janikowski doesn't kick a lot of field goals. But if you have the same kicker as your quarterback,
he blew up last week.
Yeah, he did. But I'm saying if you have the same kicker as your quarterback, say your quarterback gets a touchdown, that's great. Now you also get 7 points for that touchdown. Or say your quarterback doesn't score a touchdown, he gets the field goal range, he stalls, you're still getting 3, 4, or 5 points.
Yeah.
So that's a good strategy. Another strategy is doing just the opposite. Say your guy has Andrew Luck and you have Vinatieri. Well, every time he scores a touchdown, it's only worth 5 points instead of 6. And the same thing. Say he drives and he doesn't get the touchdown, he stalls out, and now you're getting 3 or 4 points. That's almost half of his touchdown.
That's actually a really good strategy. I know you brought it up last year, and I've never really tried that one, but that always sounds good in my head, especially using the opposite team kicker, That always makes sense to me.
And, if you're playing with some newer peoples, I said peoples, you could also maybe play some mind games with them. Be like, you know what, man? I feel so confident against you. I'll play you without a kicker and a defense. And maybe he'll play along with you. Maybe he'll be like, oh, well, I'm not going to let you beat me without a kicker and a defense, so I'm not playing one too. And then, boom, you just put him in at the last minute. It's kind of shady, but if he's done enough to play along.
Yeah, if he's done enough to play along.
I've seen it happen in a couple of leagues before.
Yeah, and then last minute put one in, and then he's missing a kicker.
I've seen it happen.
And then you lose your matchup by like 3 points.
I've seen the opposite happen where like the guy was trying to trick a guy into not playing a defense, and then at the last minute he put his defense in thinking, oh, I'm going to toot this guy over. And then the guy left his defense empty and still beat him.
I've seen it too where, a defense is the reason your team loses. Like, you end up, it's a close matchup, but your defense got you like -3 points.
You know what? That's a good point. And it also brings up to my next point. Sometimes, say I have like a couple of guys, one plays a Sunday night, one plays a Monday night, I'll leave my flex empty until like the very last minute. Like maybe I might be losing this matchup, so maybe I want to play the guy with upside, and he plays Monday night. So you always leave that flex spot open. It leaves you a lot of flexibility.
Yeah, especially, and then you see your guy that you originally were going to start in the flex, and he struggles late Sunday. You have that opening, so you can play it Monday night. So at least you have a chance at winning your matchup still.
Yeah, that's definitely something I like playing. And I know how you talk. I love how you talk about sometimes defenses get you negative points and they'll lose you a week. If you're already winning Monday night and all you guys are defense, why not? Why even play your defense?
Yeah, there's no point. Yeah. If you're already winning and it's going into Monday night and the only thing left is your defense to play, sit them because you've already won your matchup.
I know it's a question we kind of touched on a little bit. I'm going to ask you though. What do you value more in your lineup? Talent, even in a bad matchup, or a plus matchup?
I think at the start of the day you have to look at talent because, like I said earlier, I'm not going to bench, one of my most talented receivers because I have, a couple wide receiver twos with, good matchups. I'm always going to look at talent first, but then sometimes, you look at the matchup and you're like, maybe I could see it a little bit, if it's that good of a juicy of a matchup. So they're both great resources to look at, but I think I always look at talent first.
Well, another thing you got to look at is you can have all the talent in the world, what if you just don't have the opportunity? I mean, look at like guys like Allen Robinson and DeAndre Hopkins. Fucking talented as fuck, but their opportunity's not there because the quarterbacks can't get them the ball. So that's another thing you also have to look into.
Very, very true. Very true. They're both excellent resources, but yeah, I tend to lean more towards talent. But not to say that hasn't burnt me in the past before. I've won a lot of league championships, and I've lost a lot of league championships. Depending on my choices. So.
I guess what it boils down to is the old tall tale tongue-tied. But I guess it really just comes down to is talent versus opportunity. Sometimes you can go either way.
Yep.
Is there any other tips or tricks you got for setting your lineup?
I think that's it, man.
All right. Yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this show. We were just trying to give you some tips and tricks going into the playoffs. I know it's a big deal. If you guys are still listening next week, that's good news because that means you won this week. If you like this show, please rate and review us on iTunes. We are also on Spreaker. We're really trying to push Spreaker now. We're still on Blog Talk Radio. And, we're still on, what's it called? Podcast Addict. So you can find us on there.
Yeah, my final thoughts are, good luck in your fantasy matchups this week. I may or may not be on for tomorrow's show. I really hope I am able to, but I got some in-laws coming in, and you know how those are, people. So if you hear me on the show tomorrow, you can assume that I was there. If not, then it's safe to assume that I will be with you the next time we do a show. And hopefully I'll win your fantasy matchups.
If K-Mill is not on the show tomorrow, just assume I shot and killed him. Because he wouldn't come on the show, and that's rude. No, I'm kidding.
I was like, damn, man, that's pretty cold.
But yeah, that'll pretty much do it for today's show. This was episode 50. Thank you guys for helping us get here, giving us all the support in the world. We could not be here without you guys, so thank you.